Welcome to Creature Guide Live Daily News. We're doing a special edition going over a species of Spinosaur as well as four other different species of dinosaurs. And we are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. We're going to be going over a species of dinosaur from early Cretaceous Africa at first. We need to bring up Suchomimus.
Oh, I already said Edmontosaurus.
Oh, I mean, not him. Okay, we're going to be traveling forward in time to another part of the world, starting with a species of armored dinosaur called Edmontonia.
Oh, sorry.
Edmontosaurus is a species of hadrosaur that lived, depending on what species of Edmontosaurus, around the same time and the same place as this armored dinosaur. But
But I'm just an idiot that said the wrong name.
Well, Edmontosaurus is also far bigger, but not as heavily armored, and also likely was much quicker on their feet as well. Now, when it comes to Edmontonia, this animal was actually discovered far earlier in the 20th century or the 1900s compared to, I think, what many people believe. I think it's like outside of certain animals like Ankylosaurus, maybe a Euoplocephalus, or possibly when it comes to nodosaurs, Polacanthus might appear inside the mine, if anybody is at all familiar with nodosaurs. But this animal was actually discovered back or classified in 1928. I believe it was paleontologist Barnum Brown that first discovered this animal. And as well, you had it where paleontologists like Charles W. Gilmore, Levi Sternberg, and William, forgot his last name, a wide variety of different paleontologists were looking at Edmontonia back in the early 1900s. When it comes to the size of this animal, it was a larger species of nodosaur. This animal could reach somewhere around 22 to 23 feet in length, or pushing around 7 meters, and probably weighs somewhere between 2 to 3 tons. It was a very heavily armored nodosaur. And the nodosaurs were a group of ankylosauromorphs that existed throughout the Cretaceous period, even earlier into the late Jurassic. So, evolving over 150 million years ago and existing until the very end of the Cretaceous period around 66 million years ago. Now, Edmontonia specifically was inhabiting, I believe, Montana, certain parts of New Mexico, and even Alberta, Canada, back in the late Cretaceous. When it comes to the diet of this animal, it was likely feeding on different species of flowers and different species of ferns in the region. I think there have been certain instances where this animal has been depicted on feeding on specifically aquatic plants, well, as part of its diet. That's certainly possible, but I don't know of any preserved mummified remains
What are you asking?
of aquatic plants in in an Edmontonia specimen. So they were related to the ankylosaurs or members of Ankylosauridae, but they had a very different morphology, and especially when it came to not just their overall armor, but even their overall stature and the skull structure too. I'd say Edmontonia was one of the closest when it came to the skull structure of a nodosaur compared to an ankylosaur, because it was very wide, even compared to its body size. Looking at the skull,
Why does this guy
and
look sad?
um, I think he's probably exhausted. He seems to be hydrating. Maybe he had to deal with possibly a Gorgosaurus altercation, or maybe even Daspletosaurus, considering this animal likely coexisted with some of the larger species of Tyrannosaur back in central North America. So at this point, this animal would have also coexisted with a wide variety of different species of hadrosaurs or duck-billed dinosaurs, such as Corythosaurus and Lambeosaurus, and possibly Parasaurolophus, but Parasaurolophus also possibly already went extinct at this point. So the long crested hadrosaur. And then it might have coexisted with the other armored ankylosaur Euoplocephalus. Now, this animal does share a lot of common characteristics that you would have seen in also older previous species of nodosaur, especially when it comes to the elongated spiked osteoderms protruding from the side of its body, even along the neck. and down to the end of the tail. Now, it is interesting when it comes to specifically Edmontonia is that when you look at the spiked osteoderms along its tail, they're not as long as compared to other earlier species of North American Nodosaur, actually, even certain species over in Europe, such as Gastonia, which is from early Cretaceous Utah, and Polycanthus over in early Cretaceous England. So both of the animals existed around the same time, just in different parts of the world, about 135 million years ago. So far before Edmontonia, but likely one of the animals, possibly Gastonia, might have been the ancestor to Edmontonia. But they were a bit smaller than this animal. Edmontonia was a very heavily built nodosaur. However, this is not something you see in a wide variety of different species of herbivores, depending on the group of dinosaurs you're looking at. But the hind legs of Edmontonia are much longer compared to the forelimbs. This is something that we see in certain species of ceratopsians, especially different species of chasmosaurs, though it can occur in the centrosaurs as well, and even the stegosaurs earlier on. Now, the stegosaurs had already been extinct for some time. The last ones were existing somewhere around 105 to 110 million years ago, but not specifically Stegosaurus. That specific genus already went extinct about 145 million years ago at the end of the Jurassic. This is also most of these models are actually pretty good for Edmontonia. This depiction, however, seems a little more 1960s or 1970s ish. So a bit too long of a tail, or also seems a bit too flexible compared, or at least for Edmontonia, and too low to the ground as well. It should be much higher up. The hind limbs, I think, are a bit too similar in length compared to the forelimbs. Now, I don't mind, I don't know, at least when it comes to the forelimbs in some instance, they seem a bit off. There shouldn't be four clawed toes. There should only be three clawed toes and the two blunt fingers. Like the ring finger and the pinky would be blunt. They wouldn't have a claw. And then when it comes to the skull structure, it's not terrible. It does have that nodosaur look, but um I think it should have a lot more armor on it. It seems just a bit pale when it comes to osteoderms.
Wait, you said it's about it being low to the ground, right?
When it comes to the tail, it is
No, I
far.
meant the body.
Oh, um,
I have one that's higher. Here, he's
yeah,
floating.
at least.
He's
Gosh, he's.
levitating.
Yeah, I mean that is a really good Edmontonia specimen, and that could be Levi Sternberg in the background, or it's that Austrian Hungarian guy. Gosh, who was it? Stratford, I think. He helped describe, I believe, was it Tetraceratops? It was a specific species of ceratopsian, but back in the early 1900s. I'm guessing it's one of them. Um, Depending on the paleontologist back in the early 1900s, a wide variety of these different individuals found different parts of also different individuals of Edmontonia, but also it possibly was Levi Sternberg who found part of the like back end of, or like even the back armor of an Edmontonia. I think Barnum Brown found part of the front part of an Edmontonia and like donated to the museum at the exact same year. Forgot which specific museum. It was the Carnegie Museum.
Somebody just wished you Merry Christmas.
Um, Thanks. Happy Yule too. Um, so when it comes to specifically Edmontonia, um, who is it? Oh, yeah, this animal was also probably very slow, and that would also occur with many species of ankylosaur in general. They're not meant for running. They really didn't need to. Possibly when they were younger, they were a bit quicker compared to the adults because their armor wasn't as well equipped to protect them from the larger species, and also depending how large they were, if they came upon certain species of tyrannosaurs, they could easily just gobble them up. But a full-grown Edmontonia weighing 2 to 3 tons, and just how armored it was not an easy prey source to take down.
Is that supposed to be the same one?
It could be, but the other individual seems to have more armor on it, but it could be just we're seeing it from the other side.
Yeah.
I'm not sure though.
Just happen to be they're both one-footed?
Oh, it could be. That could be the same one. Maybe it's just the angle. It's always when we see that other exhibition. I don't know what museum that comes from though. Um, it's always in that specific side. This Edmontonia, I'm going to admit, has problems. Um, his skull structure is now too much like that of other members of Ankylosauridae, like even a Tarchaea over in Mongolia, which would have existed a couple million years later at least. But the armor along the side is a little too curved. There were certain species of Nodosaur that you would find these types of spiked osteoderms on, but not necessarily on Edmontonia itself. They would be a bit straighter, maybe slightly pointed at a diagonal angle, but not in this curved position. Also, when it comes to the osteoderms around the shoulder blade and even towards the neck, that is far too like certain members of Ankylosauridae. And I even say when it comes to the small osteoderms around the main core, that seems like a type of armor, not necessarily for certain species of Ankylosauridae, but earlier members of the Nodosaur family, like Polycanthus from England. Um, so yeah, this is very far off. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I've seen this painting. What is this? Could be early 2000s, maybe 1990s. But when it comes to this, is definitely just an older representation of Edmontonia. But I think this is what one of the other AI depictions might have been based off of, if that was an AI depiction.
Hello, Anna.
Let's see. I don't mind. Oh, well, here's the other problem is when it comes to the skull structure. I think Edmontonia's face would have been a bit more reinforced or even wider in structure. Kind of like one of the depictions wasn't even a drawing. I think it was one of the statues. Um,
What are you trying to do?
no, I didn't mean to move that. I think one of like that specific statue was one of the best reconstructions for Edmontonia. Now, yeah, it just is. I find it odd that earlier in the Cretaceous period, different species of smaller nodosaurs would have had longer osteoderms along the sides of their tail. And hello to the Archosaur that popped up in the chat a few seconds ago. So let's see. Yeah, because we have the fourth toe here, so it's based off of this specific representation. Um, It is interesting that they also evolved specifically like the spiked armor towards the lower end of especially the shoulder blades, considering the animals that they're having to fight, like their heads are much higher off of the ground. However, it could still cause a lot of damage, especially to their knee area or maybe a bit lower, like towards the calves. I mean, animals like Daspletosaurus and Gorgosaurus would still have a tough time with this animal. It's very possible now and then they might have hunted Edmontonia, but they're probably going to be focusing on different species of ceratopsians as well as hadrosaurs. There really aren't any sauropods. I think there are certain fragmentary remains that have been found adjacent to this like lineage of dinosaurs over in Canada, but at least we don't really have any true species of sauropods that we have discovered yet in this region. This Edmontonia has a lot of problems, especially with the tail. That is far too um, thin compared to its body size. It's also a bit short, even though Edmontonia didn't necessarily have a short tail. But I guess if you would add size to it and make it a little less flexible, then it might be okay. I think the front legs and the hind legs are a bit too. Trying to think of what animal to compare this with, but they would be a lot leaner. That is one of the interesting things about the ankylosaurids or even the nodosaurs is despite being quite wide in overall shape, they would still have quite a lot of lean muscle. And in this case, it just looks a bit pudgy with the leg structures. The skull, I think it's okay. There's something off about the beak. It's like he has a double beak to an extent on the upper jaw, but it could be just also on specific upper beaks depending on the dinosaur species. Um, it can have that type of an appearance. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of armor or even like horned armor around his skull, which it likely would have had. I think the armor towards the back looks a bit better. What is interesting is we're seeing a lot of reconstructions where just small bits of armor towards the back. Might have to get a closer examination on Edmontonia armor to see if it really is quite similar to earlier species of nodosaurs in general.
Gonna close these guys out.
Yep. So likely this animal was probably taking in
Hello, Nahid.
um, 200 pounds or a little over 90 kilograms of food a day. And um, hello, fellow theropod that entered the chat. I do like this depiction of Edmontonia. I think this looks great. The problem is it's like depicting the animal in a very grassy area, and primitive grasses had evolved during the Cretaceous, possibly earlier even to the Jurassic, but they were very distantly related to the grasses of today or what would evolve into the Oligocene epoch about 30 million years ago.
Yes, he responds.
So, these animals would not have the chewing capability to break down grass, possibly even the saliva either. As well as like the digestive juices or acid specifically. So they were just feeding on different species of ferns, flowers. It might have been possible that Edmontonia and other species of nodosaurs were feeding on fruit occasionally as well. I'm not sure when it comes to nuts. Certainly is possible. Okay. So we've now moved to another part of the world as well as further back in time in the Mesozoic. We're in the early Cretaceous period around 111 million years ago.
Why does it look like someone smushed his face?
Talking about the Spinosaur
Yes.
or yeah, Suchomimus can somewhat have this type of a look. This is also the animal that was used for the logo, at least the skull part, for Jurassic Park 3. That was not actually an actual Spinosaurus skull. So this is Suchomimus, which was discovered over in Niger around 100 and not 100, back in 1973. Um, but it wasn't classified, I believe, until around 1996 or 1998. There was a bit of analysis done back in like 1984, and I think it was Paul Sereno and a certain colleague that of Paul Sereno named the animal back in 1996 or 1998. And this animal was one of the top predators of early Cretaceous Africa back in the or at this time in the Mesozoic. Now, the animal that it's competing with is not a species of dinosaur, but it also isn't a species of crocodile or alligator either, or even a garrel. This is Sarcosuchus imperator. And this animal existed also in Niger around 110 million years ago before the large Spinosaurus would have evolved.
Where's Niger?
Niger is just north of Nigeria and possibly part of the Central African Republic, which is north of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but practically discovered in the southern Sahara Desert. Except back in the early Cretaceous, much of northern Africa was covered in a series of floodplains, conifer forests. It was it was a great sight. You had different species of sauropods in the area, different species of iguanodontids, as well as different species of hadrosaurs, not hadrosaurs. Later into the Cretaceous, there were smaller hadrosaurs, but at this point, it's just iguanodontids. Spinosaurs is what I meant to say.
Is he kind of fat?
Somebody else. Yeah, this is a very odd depiction of a Suchomimus. I mean, I don't mind it. It is interesting how they gave him a slight increase on the back vertebrae area, which is somewhat accurate. I think they kind of increased the lip length of this animal to kind of make it where when he closed his mouth, the teeth would be completely protected by the lips. But yeah, this is quite odd. Now, it is interesting is that this animal is a close relative of another species of Spinosaur that had already gone extinct probably about 20 to 23 million years earlier, named Baryonyx. And Baryonyx was existing over in England much earlier in the Cretaceous period. But like Suchomimus, it is a close relative and was likely feeding on fish. Or I believe we do have preserved stomach contents from Baryonyx and Suchomimus, indicating that these animals are feeding on fish, but also different species of fish as well. Now, an interesting thing when it comes to Suchomimus. So this animal was probably somewhere around 33 feet in length, or about 10 meters, but it was quite heavy for its size, especially a Spinosaur. It was quite heavily built. This animal probably weighed somewhere around 5 tons, and likely, um,
Is it just me or do video games make extremely good models?
oh yeah, they did,
I
but
don't know if this is a video game. I just
yeah, I think it's just a model somebody created way back. It's not a bad Suchomimus. I think there should be more weight on it, and I think the tail should have a bit more flesh on it as well. I think the neck is a bit skinny. When you're comparing like Baryonyx and Suchomimus together, Suchomimus has a longer snout compared to or jaw structure compared to its body size. But when it comes to the overall robustness, I wouldn't say it's too different between the two. Um, Baryonyx might have a slightly um, robust jaw structure, but when you're looking at the neck and the overall core of Suchomimus as well as the back of the tail, there's much more muscle compared to Baryonyx.
so this one's not good either.
Um, yeah, the skull's okay. The arms are far too short. That's another major difference between Suchomimus and Baryonyx is that Suchomimus has much longer arms compared to its body size. Also the feet on this specific Suchomimus, well, I guess for any Spinosaur, are far too short. Um, and the toes possibly might have been flat, but I might need to double check that if we have found the toes of Suchomimus specifically. Certain Spinosaurs had flat toes, which was not a common characteristic within the theropod lineage in general. Most dinosaurs, specifically the theropods, had curved toes. Oh, yeah, one of these earlier depictions. Though the arms have a bit of a problem. The hands are facing towards the ground, they should be facing each other. They could also possibly have slightly more muscle on them, but maybe even just a slightly longer length, too. But far too skinny of a neck. There's also something about the jaw structure. It could have maybe a little more muscle on it as well.
Okay.
Um,
How about this guy?
and the osteoderms along the back, we don't have any evidence for that occurring. He's okay, but I think there's a bit too much when it comes to the sail. I mean, Suchomimus did have a slight bit of an elongated back vertebrae, nowhere to the extent of certain other lineages of the Spinosaur family. But there's also something about this animal where it just seems a bit too like stiff. I don't mind the arms though. I don't think they look bad, but he might have been focusing on forearm day a little too much. It could be slightly leaner. He just looks a little puffy. But in terms of the claws, it seems okay. But there's something off, I think, about the skull. I'm not sure what it is. The osteoderms along the neck, we don't have any evidence for that. Certainly is possible, but for spinosaurs in general, they aren't usually reconstructed as having osteoderms along the back of the neck. Um, like even when it comes to the larger species such as Suchomimus, Spinosaurus, well, the two species of Spinosaurus. Irritator not is not really known for having much of an elongated back vertebrae at all. That's Spinosaur from South America. Um, what's the other? Ichthyovenator. There's a slight bit of an increase of the back vertebrae. It is a bit of a mystery as to why specifically the Spinosaurus ended up evolving elongated back vertebrae, like certain members of the iguanodontid family, such as Tyrannosaurus, which also coexisted at this time with Suchomimus. What's another one? Certain hadrosaurs, even later into the Cretaceous. You had certain proto mammals back in the Permian around 275 million years ago, as well as diapsids like, or at least the Dilophosaurids, such as the Dilophosaurus, and the synapsids like Dimetrodon. So you had a wide range of different species of animals or different lineages of animals, very far off in the family tree from each other, that evolved a very similar mutation. It doesn't seem to be with really any of these animals that they would have used their massive sails for cooling and warming down themselves, considering almost none of the animals that I mentioned were reptiles, so they would have explicitly um, relied on really food to keep themselves warm. So, as well as just simply moving around. Also, when it came to cold spells with all the animals that I mentioned, they really weren't in cooler climates too. So it seems to be that the theory is these sails are probably used for helping attract mates during the breeding season and possibly just even helping to communicate with just individual identification in general.
You want me to get rid of them?
Yeah. I will say though that the crocodilomorph Sarcosuchus that Suchomimus did coexist with um was slightly, possibly a bit smaller than Suchomimus itself. It seems to be that at the time, because I think this was a picture like back from the 1990s, it was assumed that um Sarcosuchus could reach a length of over 40 feet or 12 meters. So that would dwarf a Suchomimus. Where now it seems that the animal is probably around 30 feet in length or pushing 9 meters, but still possibly weighed some around 3 to 4.5 tons. So still a problem for Suchomimus.
It's like
Um,
8,000 pounds.
yeah, a very large crocodilomorph. And then you have the Tyrannosaurs in the background, which Suchomimus possibly fed on now and then.
Okay, just because I think it's funny.
Okay, who are we looking at here? I think this is possibly Paralititan, which was discovered over in Egypt. And I believe it was Ernst Stromer who possibly described this specific species of of sauropod back in the early 1900s. And this animal did coexist with Spinosaurus back in the early late Cretaceous as well. So this is around 98 million years ago, except our representation of Spinosaurus has drastically changed.
I think his ability to wrap his neck around is kind of interesting.
Um, yeah, I think it's a bit of a debate as to whether or not the sauropods could move their necks in this way. I think it certainly is probable. But a Spinosaurus challenging a Paralititan is very unlikely. The Spinosaurs would probably just be focusing on fish. If they're going after dinosaurs, it would be a very small Paralititan. And also, the Paralititan might not be that much taller than a Spinosaurus, but possibly with a large enough individual. Okay, here we go with these guys. So this seems to be like it mixed a Brachiosaur with a Titanosaur to a certain extent.
For those that don't know, this is an AI picture.
Yeah, it seems to be like a hybrid of Sauroposeidon and some species of Titanosaur. Like they maybe even they mixed like a Nemectosaurus in the midst of it. So one animal from early Cretaceous Texas and New Mexico, and the other animal from late Cretaceous Mongolia. Now, it is possible that these animals couldn't breed in general because the Brachiosaurs were a part of a separate lineage of Macronenian sauropods.
Wait, you said couldn't breed?
Well, yeah, because the Sauroposeidon is a member of the Brachiosaurid
Oh, okay.
family, and then what is it? If you're looking at Nemectosaurus, it's a member of the Lithostrodian lineage of dinosaurs. So likely not coexisting. Also, there doesn't seem to be any evidence, at least for any sauropod that I know of, for that specific type of armor occurring along the side of like the upper rib cage of these sauropods. Now, the osteoderms along the back of the neck, the core, as well as the caudal vertebrae along the tail is certainly possible. This seems to really only occur with certain members of like the diplodocid lineage of dinosaurs, especially the dicryosaurs. They're notorious for it. And who else? So animals like Dicryosaurus, Amargasaurus back in the early Cretaceous, as well as the late Jurassic and the mid Jurassic as well. So spanning well over 170 million years ago. But these animals, it's a bit of a mystery. Also, they seem to be marching through some mangrove swamp area that might have been a bit unlikely for a wide range of different species of dinosaurs to be roaming here. Um,
Right.
oh, well,
It took me a second to figure out what I was even looking at.
yeah, this might be a picture from the early 2000s or 1990s as well. They definitely added a lot of character to these Paralititan, but I think they're a bit thin. Paralititan is a member of the Lithostrodian lineage of Titanosaurs, so it is also related to Nemectosaurus, which has evolved much earlier over in Africa. Probably was not an ancestor, considering its lineage died out in Africa by around 94 to 95 million years ago. This was also back when we saw a major extinction with the Titanosaurs over in corresponding South America. So, Western Gondwana land as well. So, Gondwana land would have been the massive supercontinent that would have consisted of both Antarctica, Australia, South America, Africa. Some people might put India into there. So let's see. Okay, so this is a snapshot from the 2011 documentary Planet Dinosaur. I found the Paralititan, even at the time, like a bit odd. Like these animals should be, I think, a bit more. There should be a bit more muscle towards the neck. Um, it seemed to be like they were barely able to hold their head off of the ground, and I think they also seemed a bit skinny as well. I think the tail there should also be a bit more muscle on it too. A bit of an odd head structure, but I don't believe we have found the skull of Paralititan, or if we have, it's very fragmentary. So it's a big guess as to what specifically or how the skull of Paralititan would have been shaped.
I have an amazing Paralititan.
And he's back. Oh, I get it. The Spinosaurs like Suchomimus and Baryonyx were members of the Megalosauridae lineage or Megalosauridae lineage of theropods, as well as the English Megalosaurus. He's like, if you're gonna mention the Megalosaurs, my people, then you must mention me too. Considering he was the first species of Megalosaur to be discovered, as well as the first dinosaur to be clarified and also described by paleontologists such as William Buckland, Richard Owen.
He just likes to stick himself in everything.
Yeah, I mean a wide range of paleontologists. I mean, you could say most, but especially back in the 1800s, were getting into Megalosaurus, like even the Reverend Edward Hitchcock. Othniel Charles Marsh, Edward Drinker Cope. Let's see. Oh yeah, this documentary. It was a really short one. I don't remember how old it is specifically, but it takes place back in prehistoric Egypt, back in early late Cretaceous Africa, and it was like a depiction of a group of Paralititan. There might have been a Spinosaurus, and I don't remember exactly what occurred after that. But
Okay.
anyway, it always had, for some reason, a number of documentaries portray Paralititan as not having its neck very high off the ground, which is odd.
Well, this guy's got his neck pretty high off the ground.
Oh yeah, this depiction. Except okay, it could be Carcharodontosaurus. Okay, well, this is claiming that yeah, it's a young Paralititan and being carried by a couple of them. I thought for years they were a Giganotosaurus, but I guess when you look at the skull structure, it is slightly different compared to Giganotosaurus. I think Carcharodontosaurus is a bit more narrow and isn't I think Giganotosaurus is a bit more of like a wide sort of jaw structure, might even be slightly longer as well. Also Giganotosaurus, I believe, is somewhat heavier compared to Carcharodontosaurus, but Carcharodontosaurus was a contemporary to Spinosaurus in the ecosystems of northern Africa during the early late Cretaceous. Now, I don't believe, I mean, they possibly could have. This isn't necessarily an armored dinosaur, but it's just a bit hard to depict a Carcharodontosaur carrying a Paralititan, especially since I think for how sharp their teeth are, they would have probably dropped the sauropod. Just
I
be
mean,
holding
sliced
part of
right
the neck.
through it.
Um, yeah, because they have very knife-like teeth, so it's very possible that the tail and the neck would have simply separated. I don't think this is a drawing.
I think it I thought it was AI for
Yeah, it seems to slightly be on par with Paralititan to an extent, but it's really hard to say. It's almost got a bit of like a Chimerasaur sort of a look to it, at least when it comes to the stature. It is showing the shorter forelimbs compared to the hind limbs, but a very short tail as well, and also a bit high off of the ground. It just seems off in general. Too skinny too. I think I mean, the musculature for the neck seems a bit more matching compared to certain other reconstructions, and at least it's also much higher above the ground as well. Uh, no, it's not like those other depictions. I was thinking of the ones in the mangrove swamp. Okay, so it's from a wider viewpoint. Yeah, another problem with these Paralititan and the way they were reconstructed for this documentary is that they make them out, I think, to be a bit too short. They almost have like an early 1900s or like a 19, you can even say 1910s to an extent. Like I'm thinking of like Gertie the dinosaur, one of the first movies to be created. It's about like I think a woolly mammoth and brontosaurus possibly, or an apatosaurus. Might have might have been a brontosaurus. But just simply where the stomach, I think, was a bit too low to the ground or the overall core. And just something about the leg structure as well. It just doesn't seem evenly matched. Also, when it came to the overall landscape, but it might have been basing it off of certain landscapes of today, but I swear they were animated. Likely, it would have been quite a large conifer forest, and we're talking about trees that would have been well over 200 feet in height, or pushing um, somewhere over like 80 meters.
okay, ready for me to clear it?
Yep. Yeah, it was funny. He popped back up.
I still it took me a second to look at this face and think, "Wait, that's a face?"
This is honestly, I think, one of the more favored pictures. I think really just because of the character and the different coloration and patterns that were given to these sauropods. It's just that it's a bit skinny when it comes to the forelimbs and the hind limbs. Even the core, the neck seems to be lacking a bit towards like the bottom, like adjacent to the chest. But aside from that, I think the skull structure looks really good. This okay, there is an issue. The nostrils. The nostrils should be towards the front, the very front of the snout. Not this is like the issue that Brachiosaurus was having for decades. So this is very far off. I mean, but still looks good. I think the skull structure was fine, but just not the nostrils. Okay. So this animal is a species of Tyrannosaur. So we are heading to another part of the world and also a bit later in time. So towards the end of the Cretaceous period, but this was still, I believe, somewhere around 72 to 73 million years ago. And over in the state of Alaska. And this animal is found in the Prince Creek Formation, so also discovered with different species of ceratopsians, and I believe certain troodontid raptors from the region as well. So animals like Pachyrhinosaurus, the
Who is it?
larger, oh, it's Nan- Nanquenosaurus. So Nanquenosaurus was a smaller species of Tyrannosaur. Now, the interesting thing about Nanquenosaur, especially when it came to the growing stages of this animal, is that they probably didn't change in overall bone density, at least compared to their body size, from when they were young to adulthood. And this animal also was probably not much more than about 20 feet in length or 6 meters, and probably didn't weigh any more than 1,800 pounds, maybe 2,000 pounds, pushing around 8 to 900
Oh,
kilograms.
I figured it was bigger.
No, it's a smaller species. And yes, this animal did live in the snow, at least during the winter, possibly early spring, as well as the different species of ceratopsians that it coexisted with. And who else? The troodontids. Likely there were hadrosaurs here as well, especially in Montosaurus, has been discovered over in Lake Cretaceous, Alaska. So this animal also, when you look at the jaw structure, is very different from the different species of tyrannosaurs that inhabited further south in Alberta, Canada, as well as different parts of Montana, Wyoming. It would really contain that more narrow jaw structure as it grew, unlike the other species of tyrannosaurs that would become much broader as they aged. Also, it's very peculiar when it comes to its horn structures just above the eyebrow. Now, you could say this is a bit similar to maybe even Gorgosaurus or Albertosaurus to an extent, but they're very peculiar on Nanquenosaurus. So, this animal also had slightly longer arms compared to its body size, unlike other species of tyrannosaurs. So, it's still a bit of a debate as to whether or not it would have used them for taking down animals, but um, they were certainly capable of definitely taking on like a younger hadrosaur, but it still would have to be quite careful. There was also quite limited mobility in or using the arms as well. It's possible that this animal was covered in feathers even into adulthood, considering this animal did live in a much cooler environment, but it also wasn't very large either. This also seems to be the case with most of the dinosaurs in the region. There have been, I think, certain interpretations of the hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus, besides it being probably the largest dinosaur in the region, containing feathers,
Oh, wait a minute. This is interesting.
but to a much later amount. Yeah,
So
it's from
this
Prehistoric Planet.
and this are the exact same picture.
Well, they're not the exact same picture, but I think they might be taking place in a similar.
But look at the coloring. This is blue.
I think this is when it's in that episode when they were chasing the Ornithomimus, and then the other ones where they're facing off the Pachyrhinosaurus herd. Um, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think they're decent models. I mean, I think the feathers were well accumulated, but we don't have any evidence, I think, for Nanquenosaurus though having feathers, but certainly is likely, considering they would have encountered blizzards as well as the different species of ceratopsians and hadrosaurs would have to deal with different fluctuating weather patterns as well. They probably did migrate south too. Animals like Nanquenosaurus might have had their own distinct territory. There is also certain evidence for different species of smaller dinosaurs likely hibernating, at least that we have evidence of from different parts of Australia and possibly Antarctica, definitely Australia, from the early Cretaceous period. Seems to be with different members of the iguanodontid family, especially the smaller elasmarians. They seem to have hibernated. But I need to specifically see as to or refresh my mind to why we're saying that. Well, this is probably not too inaccurate. I mean, it seems like it's just a young Nanquenosaurus. This is probably full sized, and he is very robust here. But the Edmontosaurus would have dwarfed this animal. despite it probably being one of the largest carnivores in the area, at least for full-grown Edmontosaurus. That is, if it's not dealing with a pack, it's really not much of a threat. But you could have it, and I believe there are certain instances where the Tyrannosaur Gorgosaurus was inhabiting Alaska during the late Cretaceous at around this time as well. So that's where Edmontosaurus would have a bigger problem, even when roaming in a herd. We're talking about a larger Tyrannosaur that could have reached a length of about 30 to 32 feet or pushing 9 to 10.8 meters and probably weighs some around 2 to 3 tons. That's even a 5 to 7 ton Montosaur that doesn't really have any armor is going to have an issue. Now, it could use its tail, but a lot of the time it seems that the animal just ran away, at least due to preserved bite marks and also indicating that they had healed on different Montosaurs that we have discovered. Some coming in from the time of T Rex, but T Rex won't evolve for another few million years. Also, further south in Montana. I think the Montosaur hatchling in the back looks decent. It's very likely that these animals were already roaming with their parents at a very young age, unlike the long necked species of sauropods. The Tyrannosaurs likely stayed in a specific territory and would probably have helped feed their young, as well as their young earlier on would probably attend certain hunting expeditions. This is not a bad representation of a Nanquenosaurus or possibly a Gorgosaurus roaming Alaska during the late Cretaceous, especially during the winter, and likely would have seen the northern lights as well. Though that seems to be a rainbow sort of northern light thing. Maybe that occurs. I'm only used to seeing them in like light purple or green. Yeah, it does. But Gorgosaurus at this time might be focusing on certain species of ceratopsians that might have stayed behind. But it's still a big question as to whether or not they would have migrated south or not. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to travel like a couple million years into the future, but to a different part of the world. So we're over in Mongolia around 71 million years ago. And at this time and era, you did have a species of theropod that would sort of break the rules of the theropod lineage in general. It wasn't just due to the size of its hands, but also the way that it fed. See, most species of theropods were carnivorous, but when it comes to this specific lineage of the Saurischians, and specifically the Therizinosaurs, so the Saurischians being the lineage of dinosaurs that theropods and long-necked sauropods belong to. The Therizinosaurs first evolved during the early Cretaceous period, so well over 125 million years ago. But they would pretty much exist until the very end of the Cretaceous. And Therizinosaurus being the largest species of Therizinosaur to evolve, this animal reached somewhere around 35 to 38 feet in length, or pushing um, somewhere around 10 point, I mean, not 10.8, well, maybe it would be somewhere around there. At least 11 to 11.6 meters, and probably weighs somewhere around 5 to 6 tons. And it also had some of the longest arms compared to its body size of any species of dinosaur, or some of the, well, any species of carnivorous or theropod dinosaur. So reaching a length, if you're including the humerus, the radius, the ulna, um, of the, and also like the phalanges of the arm, this animal could have arms that reach over 8 feet, or probably pushing somewhere around 2.4 meters. And the claws alone are probably around 3.3 feet or a meter in length.
Lost him.
But it seems to be, or at least when it was originally discovered, I believe back in the 1930s or 1940s, it was originally thought by the Soviet expeditioners that these were part of the ribs or no, part of the claws of a giant marine turtle. So basically, they thought that this animal or the turtle would have used its long claws to help grab seaweed. And then a bit later in time, it was described to be a species of carnosaur. And then much further, I think more excavation of the specimen as well as deeper analysis indicated that this was of a different lineage of theropods. And I believed it was after this animal, then they named it Therizinosauridae.
This one has mange.
Yeah, he's got a lot of problems. He looks a bit similar in stature to a North American species that lived much earlier in the Cretaceous, around 90 to 92 million years ago, named Nothronicus. But still quite odd. I mean, yeah, if he's having to lean down to get some water, that's fine. But another issue is the teeth. They seem a bit long compared to his body size. Then the crest on top of its head. That's a bit off. I think there should also be a bit more muscle towards the arms of this animal. But when it comes to the Therizinosaurs in general, many cases there isn't a lot of muscle placed onto the upper and the forearms, which is interesting. And also, their fingers in general don't tend to be very wide.
Wait,
It-
I have a great one.
oh boy. Well, I mean, these altercations likely would have occurred, but this animal did not coexist with T Rex. In fact, there doesn't seem to be any evidence for Therizinosaurs coexisting with T Rex.
I think he's been eating too much.
Yeah, the Therizinosaurs had a very wide rib cage, a very wide gut. So they're just digesting a lot of plant material. The animal that this Therizinosaurus likely came into contact with, and even itself had to be careful, was Tarbosaurus batar, virtually the second largest species of Tyrannosaur to evolve. The conifer forest, I mean, is very likely, depending on where you were in late Cretaceous Mongolia. And you would have come into contact with different species of larger hadrosaurs. There were different sauropods in the region. Then you had Therizinosaurus. This animal could also reach a height of somewhere around 16 feet or pushing around 5.2, 5.3 meters. But I have to say, in this case, the neck structure might be a little short and a little too wide compared to what a Therizinosaur should look like. The skull is also a bit off as well when it comes to like the beak towards the end of the snout and then the teeth.
I don't
This
think he was any longer a herbivore. I think he was eating T Rexes to get looking like that.
you mean Tarbosaurs?
Oh,
Um, yeah, they're just putting a T Rex toy in the background or foreground. Oh yeah, interesting. I haven't seen this type of model before. It's very possible that Therizinosaurus might have used its claws in certain ways to help bring down food to its jaw, but the problem is that Therizinosaurus's claws couldn't really reach even up to its like the top of its skull to a major extent. So it's not really able to bring down branches that are above itself. But it seems to be that it's depicting like a certain tree that was just, I guess, light enough in overall, um, like wood density that it was able to just sort of bend it to a major extent. He
maybe
seems
it's
to
a
be doing.
banana tree. Those are just
Uh,
weird bananas.
oh, I was thinking of like something else.
Coconut.
Maybe I don't know when bananas or coconuts evolved. But there was fruit back in the late Cretaceous, so this certainly is possible. It's also very probable that their Xenosaurus might have taken care of its young.
Here's a lazy one.
Oh, yeah, wow. You know what it kind of resembles? A bit of a ground sloth to an extent. He also seems to be plucking certain flowers, maybe from the tree. I'm not sure if I would call that fruit. It certainly is possible. Um, yeah, I mean, it's very likely that their Xenosaurus could have simply sat on its pelvis bone and simply fed for a period of time. not really worrying about most carnivores on the landscape besides Tarbosaurus. Now, I'd say the herbivores might be a bit more of an issue. There weren't really any large ceratopsians that it had to be very concerned about. This seems to be a bit of an older depiction. Actually, you know what it reminds me of is that disgraceful Jurassic World Dominion Therizinosaurus. Except he seems a bit thinner, and his toes seem quite far off as well. Very thin tail too. A, quite an odd skull structure. This animal is very far off.
Oop, hold on.
This is not a bad Therizinosaurus. That's pretty realistic. When it, he might be a bit tall, but mm, guess we can't tell specifically. I don't think that humans is exactly 2 meters. But um, besides the height issue and the toes, he's got a fourth major toe. That's a bit of an issue. But besides that, he doesn't seem to be a bad Therizinosaur. I think the head structure looks pretty good. I think it's a good lean neck as well. And the arms seems to be a bit more muscle added to the fingers, unlike certain other interpretations. The whole animal in general looks quite lean. I think it looks pretty good. Might be lacking some feathers, however. Okay, so thanks for joining. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guy Live Daily News. Happy International Suchomimus Day. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.